Welcome to this video. We are going to be focusing on how to launch AWS EC2 instance. This is the agenda. Agenda for today, we're going to be looking at Ubuntu and Amazon Linux too. These are two different operating systems. We are also going to be looking at the SSH protocol and what it means. First of all, we go through some notes here, of course, to be able to understand exactly what EC2 instances are, and also to have an idea of exactly what AWS is. AWS stands for Amazon Web Services. It's usually a public cloud that is going to provide us with so many resources that we are going to be using in this class. Part of those resources, we have computing power, of course, which is generated by the EC2 instances. EC2 instances is just another name of servers. And these servers are usually on AWS. It's not a must to be just on AWS. They can be on any other cloud. But AWS is one of the most famous clouds that we have today. These instances, of course, they can run in various operating systems. One of the advantages of going to the cloud is that you are, as a team, you become more flexible. That is very possible because in the cloud, you can have as many operating systems as you want. So when it comes to launching EC2 instance on AWS, there are two ways we can do it. We can either go manually or we can use the automated way. Today, we are going to focus on the manual method. And that is going to involve us creating an account and going on AWS Management Console, which is usually accessible through the web browser, and provisioning the resource we want manually. It's very important we do the manual process first before, of course, we go to automation, because it's going to give you the foundation of the knowledge that you need, especially when it comes to the AWS environment. So what is the focus of this video? The focus is very simple. By the end of this session, we are going to have gained the practical experience that we need to manually create and configure AWS EC2 instances. And we are going to focus specifically on Ubuntu Linux and Amazon Linux. Now we continue with the launching AWS instances. And we are looking at the two methods that we talked about. Here, I just want to talk a little bit into detail so that you can have an idea. As DevOps, we are not supposed to launch these instances manually. There are so many disadvantages that usually come with launching instances manually. Some of those disadvantages include making errors, not being able to repeat the same kind of environment. But for now, we're going to start with the manual process. And with time, of course, in this course, we are going to teach you exactly how to automate the entire process of launching the instances in the cloud, specifically in AWS. The manual method, of course, involves you going to the AWS Management Console. You have to log in. After logging in, you have to go to different kinds of consoles where you can find the resources. When it comes to automation, of course, we have to use tools because automation means The tools are doing the job for us. One of the most famous tools that is greatly used for automation of the cloud infrastructure is called Terraform. Is in the class of tool we call IAC, Infrastructure as Code. However, at this point, we are not going to focus on this tool, but as we continue, this is going to become the tool of our choice, specifically when we are provisioning many infrastructure, and we want to make sure that we have consistencies in our environment. We continue with the concept of launching AWS EC2 instances. Today, of course, we are focused on manual launch of EC2 instance, but it is very important for you to know that this is not the most recommended method. In future, we are going to explore deeper into how to automate the process. And that means we are going to be getting conversant with tools for automation. And the best one at the market today is Terraform. It's very important you understand what AWS Console is. In our journey to launch AWS instances manually, we are going to go on the internet and we have to get into AWS Management Console. The console is very important because it's going to serve as a command center where we are going to be managing all the AWS resources from. The AWS Management Console is nothing but is just a web-based interface that is going to help you to create the resources that you want in an easy way that is very friendly. The best thing about AWS Console is that you can access it from any web browser. As far as you have the user's account, which means you need to have password, you need to have the username, and as far as you can be authenticated by AWS, you'll be able to get access into the console and you'll be able to launch the resources that you need. We're going to see that. Now I decided to take a picture of AWS console. This is how it usually looks like. As you can see in the console home, I'm already logged in. We are going to see this process, especially when we come to creating the instances. I'm going to take you step by step, so it's not going to be an issue. But as you can see in this console home, I do have some resources that I have been using on frequent basis. You can see S3 bucket, EC2. At this point, we are not going to focus on all these resources. AWS has many resources. The last time I checked was about 1,200 services they offer. So they have so many resources there. Do you need to know all of them? No, you don't need to know all of them. But out of those many services that AWS has, there are some services or tools or resources that are used a lot by companies, and those are the ones that you need to be conversant with. That is a topic that we are going to take you through when we enter into the cloud computing. Now, this is nothing but just the steps that you need to follow. These steps are very clear. You need to follow these steps to be able to launch your instance. The first thing is that we must sign into AWS Console. To sign in, we go to our browser. And we are going to click on this link. And when we click on the link, it's going to open for us. When you get into the console, we're going, of course, to go to the dashboard. And we are going to select the kind of resource that we want. In our case, we want EC2 instance. Why do we need EC2 instance? Because it's a server and has a computational power. After that, we are going to click on launch. And after launching, we are going to continue with the whole process. We're going to choose, of course, the AMI. Choose the instance type. Then we start to configure things like network, IAMLO, and all that. Add the storage, add the tag, configure the security group. We have to ensure that port SSH is open, port 22. Without port 22 being open, we cannot be able to access this server remotely. Then we are going to review everything and launch. And finally, we are going to choose and create a key pair. A key pair is what is going to help us, of course, to securely access this remote server. Without having the key pair, we'll not be able to access the server. Finally, we are going to launch the server. Then we'll return to the console and we'll view the server. And then we are going to go to the SSH and you access the server remotely. And finally, we'll run a few commands that are famous to DevOps. And we'll see exactly how the operating system is going to behave. So from here, what we are going to do, we are going to go to our internet or on the browser. You're going to open a new page, or you can just click on this link. If not, it's asking me some questions here. I'm going to skip verification because I don't need to be verified. And of course, you are going to come to the AWS console. It looks like this. If you don't have an account, you need to create one. If you have an account, it's just a matter of logging in. So I'm going to do this here. And what I'm going to do is to type AWS. And when I type AWS, a console is going to come here. I'm going to get this information, as you can see. Then I'm going to click on this link. And it's going to open like this. So if you don't have an account, you have to come here and complete all these steps and register for a free tier account. When you register for a free tier account, you have to be careful because you don't qualify for all resources. There are some resources that are specific for free tier account. And those resources are usually tiny EC2 instances. And you can use them specifically for the study purposes, but they cannot be used to create enterprise environment. They are too tiny. If you have an account, of course, you create an account, you follow the steps AWS is going to give you. And when you're done, you should be able to come here and click on sign in. And when you click on sign in, already mine have signed me in because I was already in. So I'm going to sign out. And I'm going to come again and I'll say sign into the console. So this is where you should come. When creating your account, you have two choices. You can either be the root user or you can be the IAM user. So what's the difference between the two users? You have to know that the root user account owner that is able to perform the task that require unrestricted access. So the root means you have more privileges. You have almost all the privileges that you need to run all the tasks in the server or in the system, or anything that you want to perform or execute, you have the permission to do that. If you are going to open IAM user account, which is usually your organization can open one for you, you're not going to have all the privileges. There are some privileges you might not have at all. So you might be able to perform some tasks, but some tasks you might not have the permission to perform them. This is because when you are IAM user, when we create IAM user, we always restrict how much access you have. For instance, I can create an IAM user, and I can restrict that IAM user to only access the S3 bucket, or maybe just access EC2 instances. If that user tried to access something else, he or she is not going to have the permission to do that. So I'm the root user because I already have the account, my own account. So I'm going to log in. It's very simple. Of course, it need to verify and input my password. And I'm going to say sign in. Give it some time. As you can see now, we are inside the AWS console. This is what we call the console. This console has many resources. Of course, we'll cover most of them in the topic of cloud computing. But for today, we are just concerned about EC2. So the question is, how do you get to EC2? You are going to come here to the search box, and you are going to put EC2. As you can see, when you do that, there are some services that are popping out here. We don't need to bother too much. We just need to click on EC2. When we do that, it's going to open this console that is specific to the EC2. These are all the things that are related to the EC2. Then what we need to do is to click on the left-hand side, instances. And as you can see, I have no instances. You have to be careful. You have to look at this area because this is the region that you are in. So it's important to remember that AWS is divided into regions. As you can see, we have different kind of regions in the US. We have US East, North Virginia, US East, Ohio, US West, North California, and we have US West, Oregon. So these are all regions. In each region, there might be different kind of data centers. For instance, in the US East, one which is North Virginia, we might have 3 data centers. Those data centers, as we continue with the course, is what we usually call availability zones. Availability zones. So those are very vital. We'll come to see how they enhance or help us to create and provision infrastructure that is highly available. For now, we just concerned and focus on how to create instances manually. The next step, of course, is to click on Launch Instance. It's going to open this new window, and all we need to do is to start by giving it a name. So we can give it the name of our training, which is Amazingdevops. After that, you have to come and choose the kind of OS image that you want. This now brings us to the concept that we were talking about, flexibility. As you can see, we have so many operating systems. You can't exhaust them. There are many. So it means that in the cloud, I can come and get AWS Amazon Linux. I can get Mac OS, I can do Ubuntu, I can do Windows. But for today, we are going the same concept we are using to launch one of the instances, the same you are going to use for other instances. So for this case, I'm going to launch Amazon Linux. So I have to click on the image. And after that, I have to come here. Of course, when you click on the image, it automatically come here. There are different versions of Amazon Linux. As you can see, if I click on this down arrow, you are going to see that we have 23, we have another one here, Amazon Linux. This is a little bit older version. Is also eligible for free tier account. As far as you are using a free tier account, you have to make sure that this is eligible. I'm not going to use 2023. I'm going to use Amazon Linux 2. From there, we have to come and choose the type. Again, you have to be careful here because when choosing the type, make sure it's eligible for the free tier. So we're going to go with the smallest one. As you can see, it's called T2 Micro. This T2 Micro has one CPU and 1 GB of memory, very tiny. Next is that we are going to create a key pair. How do you create a key pair? For my case, I already have some key pair here, but I'm going to show you exactly how to create one so that in the process of creating it, you can see exactly what type you need to be focused on. To create a key pair, you just need to come here and click on create a new key pair. You have to give it a name. Again, we can call it Amazingdevops. It's going to be RSA, of course, and it's going to be a PEM key. It's not going to be PPK. You can use PPK if you are dealing with PULI. So if you are dealing with PULI, you can use PPK. But in our case, we are not going to be using PULI to SSH. We are going to be using our Visual Studio Code. Then you just have to say create. And when you do that, it's going to open in the area that you have specified. In my case, it is opening in the Visual Studio Code. It's okay, I'll show you exactly how to go about this when we get to this step. So you can leave it for now and return back to the AWS console. Of course, when you create it, it also come here and you have to make sure that it is appearing here inside the box. The next thing is that we must create a network. There is no way you are going to be able to access your instance without network. So you're going to come here. The first thing is to come and click edit. And as you can see, we don't have any network. So the question is, how do we go about this? If we say create a new subnet, of course it will create a subnet. But unfortunately, we don't have the VPC. So what do? We need to go and create a VPC. A VPC is what we call the virtual private cloud. It is what is going to be the source of the network to our instance. Our instance must be secure and must be within a given private network. Unfortunately, I don't have any VPC. I don't have any network. So we are going to go to the AWS console again, and we'll create a VPC. before we can come back and proceed. So how do we do this? We're going to come here to the search bar again, and you're going to type VPC. Immediately you do that, services are going to appear. And as you can see among the services, we do have VPC. So you're going to click on VPC. And of course, it's going to take you to another console. And this is how AWS looks like. Every service has its own console, every major service. A VPC is a major service for network. EC2 is a major service for computing power. S3 bucket is a major service for storage. So all the major services, they have their own consoles. And those consoles are where you can get all the other services that are related to the main service. In this case, we can see that we do have the VPC, main service, and then we do have many other services that are related to the VPC. So how do we create a VPC? We're going to come here and say create a VPC. It's going to give you some diagram here, as you can see, and the diagram is going to be changing as we continue to manipulate the information that we have on our left-hand side. Of course, we don't want to create just VPC. We do need subnets. I'm not going to go deep into what these are, but I just want you to know that this is the network, and this is where we need to put our instance so that we can even be able to access the instance remotely. A VPC is a huge network. Inside of that huge network, we have some divisions of smaller network called subnet. It is in those small network called subnet where we are going to put all our instances. So we need more than just VPC. We do have the IPv4. I'm not going to go into the CIDR block. Tenancy default is fine. These are availability zones I was talking about. Those are well covered in my computing cloud sessions. Now here we can decide the number of subnet that we want. We can go with 2. There are 2 types of subnet, private and public. For public subnet, this is where we put our web servers. Again, another concept that is going to be covered in my training. Private subnet is where we put all the private servers that contain sensitive information. A good example of those servers is a database, application server. Those ones stay inside the private subnet because there is what we call the private network. In the public subnet, we have what we call internet traffic, or what we can commonly call public traffic. We can have a NAT gateway. I'm not going to cover that now. I just want us to create a VPC, and then we are going to say create a VPC. You can see that this VPC, for it to become a VPC that is going to be used to host our servers, it has many services. The best thing is, if you go and register for our computing cloud training, these are all things we cover. It's done. We go and view the VPC. Your VPC, and here it is. We are done with the VPC. This is the network. Now we have to go back to the EC2 console. Again, it's a major service. You must come and say EC2 console. To get to the EC2 console, you must come and say, and type EC2, click on EC2, We have no instance. The instance that we wanted to create, we did not finish creating because we did not have the network. We needed to first of all go and create the network, then come back here so that we can finish the whole process of creating the instance. And this is what manual process takes. It's very time consuming. We click on instances. We launch instances. And now we have to go back to the same process that we were doing before we went to create the network. We give it a name. We have to choose the AMI. And in this case, I'm going to go with 22. I'm going to go with Amazon Linux 2 instead of Amazon Linux 2023. That is the newest. I'm going to go with T2 Micro. The best thing is that we already created a key pair. So you just choose the key pair, is the same, has the same name as the server. And as you can see, because now we created the network has been populated. We don't need to really bother too much, but we still need to edit it so that we can put this instance in the specific subnet that we want. As you can see, we are selecting the public subnet. We are going to put it in the public subnet because we need to SSH into it. But you must do something here, because if you forget to do this, you can as well forget to access this instance through SSH. You must enable the public IP creation. Why do you need public IP? Because we're going to use it, of course, to access this instance that is in the public subnet. That is one of the requirements of accessing the instance through SSH. You must have the public IP address. You must also have the key pair that we created. And of course, you must have the port 22 open. To be able to manage the security groups in AWS, or to be able to manage all the rules of the traffic and the ports to open and the type and the protocol, you do need to create what we call security groups. As you can see here, the type is SSH. The protocol is TCP, and the port is 22. If this port is not open, we'll not be able to SSH. And without doing much, we just have to come back here and launch the instance. It's going to take just a little bit of time. Then you need to come here and click on this instance ID. And after that, it's going to return back to the EC2 console. And what you can see now, it is pending. It's going through the process of launching. It's going to take time because it's being virtualized. It might take about 1 or 2 minutes, and then it's going to be ready for us. I'm going to click on this square box here, and there are some things you should start seeing coming up. One is that you can see that the public IPv4 address has been created. This instance also has a private IPv4 address. As you can see, it also have the DNS. And also now it is in the running state. I'm going to refresh it again. It's still initializing. We are going to give it a little bit of time. Now, what is the next step after this? The next step is going to SSH into this instance. After being able to SSH, we are going to access this server remotely, and we can be able to manage, write scripts, run commands, and also monitor the resources. And at the same time, be able to manage the application that we have running inside of this server. So we are going to access it straight from our terminal. Going to refresh it again, still initializing. So when it's ready, you are going to see that the status check is going to change. At the moment, it is still initializing. Let's check and see whether it's ready to go. And finally, yes, it has passed the checks, 2 out of 2. Now we can go and SSH. You have to be careful now. There are many ways you can SSH into this instance. However, I want to give you the simplest way to do it. First, you have to locate where your PEM key is. In my case, my PEM key downloaded in Visual Studio Code. It's not a must yours is going to download here. Yours can go into the download section, and if it goes there, it's perfectly fine. So since mine came here, there is something I need to do. To be able to open this, you can do several things. You can either save it. As you can see, went to the download. So if I come here to the folder explorer and I come to the download, I'm going to see it here. And it's the same case for you. If you come to your folder explorer that is actually at the bottom of your computer, and then of course you click on the download, it's going to take you exactly where you have your PEM key. Now, what I want you to do is to go to your desktop. Go to your desktop, you can minimize your AWS Management Console. And this is my desktop. So in the desktop, I want you to create a new folder. For me to do that, I just need to right click. And then I need to come to the new, and I need to come here and say new folder. This folder, call it Amazon Linux. Enter, and it's going to save like that. Now, what I want you to do is to come back to the folder explorer, and I want you to move this screen on the other side, move it a little bit to your left-hand side, or move the folder in a way that you can still see the folder, and at the same time, you can see your screen. There is a reason I'm trying to make you do this, because if you don't know exactly how to go about, you are always going to find that it's very difficult to SSH into the instances that are on AWS. Now, come back to where your PEM key downloaded into. In my case, it is in the download section. And I believe even in your case, it's also in the downloads section. Now, you're going to bring your cursor here, click on the cursor, then move it out and take it inside the folder that we created. When you do that, you can close this window because we don't need this window anymore. Now we have this folder. And as you can see in this folder, we do have the PEM key inside. So what do we do from here? Very simple. You have to have either Visual Studio Code or you have to have Git Bash. If you don't know how to install them, It's very easy. You just need to go to your web browser. You can do that. You come to your web browser and you say Visual Studio Code. It's going to come here. It's very famous. It's the IDE that we are going to use a lot of time. And then you just need to download it. It will take just a few minutes and it should be ready for you to use. Another thing that you need to get is a bash terminal. To get a bash terminal, you need to install git bash. You see it? Click on it. It's going to come here, git SCM. SCM is nothing but a source code manager or management. You click on git, and of course, when you click on it, you can be able to download the version that you want. If you are in Mac OS, fine. Windows, fine. Linux, fine. For people in Windows, you just need to click on Windows, and you can choose the kind of bit that you have and just download it. When you're done downloading, you can come to the search bar and you just have to say git, and it's going to give you the git bash. And this is the bash terminal that opens. Now we're going to minimize again the AWS console. We don't need it. And we are going to be dealing with the bash terminal that we just opened after you have downloaded the git bash or the git SCM. Also make sure that you download the Visual Studio Code. Those are things that download very fast into your computer. Now, we're going to close this window. And we are going to come back to this folder. And we are going to right-click on the folder. And we're going to go to show more options. For some people, Visual Studio Code is going to appear here. Or the git bash is going to appear here. For my case, I have to click on show more options. And that is how I'm going to see the git bash. I still can see the Visual Studio Code, but as far as I can see the git bash, I'm fine to go. So I'm going to say open with git bash, and it's going to open this kind of window. I'm going to increase the size, the font size. How do I do that? You have to click Control and plus sign. Control and plus. Now, if I do ls, which means I'm trying to list the content inside of the folder, I'm going to see that my PEM key is actually here. Now, how do I go to Visual Studio Code? It's very easy. To go to Visual Studio Code from git bash, I can type the command code, then space and dot, and enter. And what you're going to realize is that Visual Studio Code is going to open for you. Here it is. So I'm going to remove all this information. I don't need that. And here it is. This is my folder. And I can see my PEM key here. And this is the PEM key. So what do I need to do from here? I need to come to here to the Visual Studio Code. And I need to look for terminal. In my case, the font size is bigger. For some people, the font size is going to be smaller. It matters with how big you want your font size to be. In my case, I like the font size to be this size because you can easily see what I'm doing. So if that is the case, some of the functionality of the Visual Studio Code might be hidden. So I have to click the three dots, and then I'm going to see the terminal here. I'm going to say new terminal. When I say new terminal, it's going to open like this. This is how it looks like. There is something I want you to see here. There are different kinds of terminals. PowerShell, of course, because I'm using Windows. But if I click on this down arrow, I can see some other kind of terminals. And I do want to use a Git bash. If you're using Git bash, this is the kind of colors you are going to be getting. Now, you must do ls again to make sure that your PEM key is still with you. And in this case, you can see the PEM key is now in the folder that I'm currently in. Now we need to return back to the AWS console. And here I want you to be very careful because here we have to get the SSH command. And how do we do that? We're going to come and highlight this instance or simply click inside the square box and then come here and say connect. When you say connect, it will give you different kind of options. We have EC2 Instance Connect, Session Manager, SSH Client, EC2 Serial Console. In our case, we're going to go with SSH. Of course, you open SSH Client, which we have already done. We're going to use Visual Studio Code. You locate your private key file, which we have done. The private key file is actually inside the folder that we created on the desktop. And we did put our PEM key inside. And when we run the command ls, which is to list the content, we are able to see our PEM key inside. You must run this command, if necessary, to ensure that your key PEM is not public. So we are going to copy this command. We go back to our Visual Studio Code, and we're going to paste it. If you enter this command and does not work, your PEM key is not within your folder. So let's enter. In our case, it works. So I did not expect any output. That's all. So we have now made this key to become private. It's no longer public. It's very private now. What do you do after that? You return back to AWS console. You don't need to bother about number 4, but you need to go to example. And here you can see the example to give you the SSH command to use. But in our case, instead of using the naked IP address, we are using the DNS. So you're going to come here and copy this command, go back to your SSH client, and of course, paste and enter. You're going to have to type yes, not Y. Some people type Y. No, yes. And now we are inside the server. We have been able to access this server remotely. There are a few things we can do. First of all, let's check the print working directory. It's home EC2 user. Let's check who we are. You can just say, who am I? I'm EC2 user. But EC2 user doesn't have as many privileges as the root. So the question is, how do you become the root? To become the root, you need to come here and type the command sudo. Sudo stands for super user do. This is a user that has the super capability. Then you have to type su, which means switch user. Enter, and all of a sudden, you are no longer a $sign, now you are £sign. Let's say again, who am I? As you can see now, you are the root. You have more privileges. There are many commands you can run as a DevOps engineer. The list of commands I have given them. But in this case, I'm going to just run a few of them. And this command will help you and to see exactly how the operating system works. This server is all the way in North Virginia. I'm not with it physically, but I still can be able to access, communicate with it securely through the SSH protocol, be able to check the system. For instance, let's say I want to check how many CPUs are in my server. The command is nproc. I enter, and I see that I only have one CPU. Let's say I want to check the date today. Today, you can see the date. It's always configured in UTC, but you can always change it to fit the region you're in. What about the date? Maybe cow. And it's going to tell me that today is date 6. What about if I want to see how the processes are utilizing the resources? One of the famous commands is what we call the top command. If I enter, I can be able to see all the users. I can be able to see the task, the CPU utilization percentages. I can be able to see the memory, etc. How do I come out of this window? I just need to say Control Z, and it's going to return me back to the user. We're going to run one more command, and we'll come to the end of this video. The same way we have provisioned Amazon Linux or Linux, is the same way you are going to provision Ubuntu Linux. It's the same way you are going to provision other kind of operating system that you like. So let's check the OS name. To be able to check the OS name, we're going to use the cat command. Again, I have a list of all these commands and what they do. That list should be available to you. Of course, it's nothing, but we are checking the OS information. It's a configuration file. Of course, it should be in the etc directory. And we're going to say release, and that will give us the name of the OS is Amazon Linux. This is the OS name. You can see all the information pertaining to this OS. That brings us to the end of this important video. Go through the video, practice again. Instead of launching Amazon Linux, you can now launch Ubuntu. Follow the steps. And thank you for listening to Amazing DevOps.